We came across this technology used by the US military, and it had what we were looking for. But it was really taking the industry into a different area. And in manufacturing, speed is money. Where does it offer the most advantage for that end customer? You know, why should they change from what they do? Because change is hard.
What are your thoughts on the state of manufacturing at the moment, and what do you think could be done better?
We're tackling some of the most challenging problems that people are targeting today. So it's really moving that manufacturing power, controlling your own destiny. That's the sort of technology that we offer. So if you're on a mine site and you can't get your part, that might be costing you $1 million a day. And being able to build a part right there and then is something that is very, very attractive. The manufacturing sector is moving, and it's moving in a fantastic way. You know, new technologies are coming in, but it's looking at those new technologies and working out which one's right for me. Give them a shot, because if you don't, your competitor will.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Inspiring Industry podcast, where we share our conversations with leaders from around the globe. I'm your host, Danielle Champ, and this episode, we are revisiting a topic that we have covered before. However, the difference being is that in this conversation, our guest is joining us all the way from Australia. We're especially excited about our conversation with Byron Kennedy, the co-founder of SPEE3D. Byron, alongside his long-term business partner, Steve Camilleri, who unfortunately couldn't join us for our conversation this morning, will be telling us a bit more about the company's specialties and how innovation in the 3D printing sector is just buttressing the industry in ways that 10 years ago would not have been imaginable. We'll also be taking a look at how his work is proving critical for the defense industry. So, without any further ado, let's dive straight in. It's an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you today and to learn more about SPEE3D, which specializes, from what I know, in metal additive manufacturing, with obviously the assistance of 3D printing. So I have little bits and pieces of how you came to founding the company, and you were a co-founder along with Steve Camilleri. How did you guys join forces? What was that journey like?
Yeah, that's a fascinating story to start with. So this is actually our second startup together. We had another startup prior to this one developing electric motors. And that's even a fascinating story. We built solar cars while at university, and this was back in the 90s, mid-90s. And interestingly, that technology went on to be used in a lot of the electric vehicles you see today. But we won't talk about that today. We'll talk about the latest venture. So, but that company was very successful. We built that company, sold it to a large US manufacturing company, and we worked for them for 10 years in manufacturing. And during that journey in manufacturing, we came across this technology, this 3D printing technology, and it offered a lot of advantages in supply chain, which is really difficult, especially in current environments, interestingly. And but the reality was traditional, and when we say 3D printing, we're just in metals. We don't do anything in plastic, so all in metals. And traditional metal 3D printing was just too expensive and too slow. So we thought, could we develop a technology which was fast and low cost and suited for this production environment? And that was the original hypothesis near on 10 years ago now, the 2015, 2016 kind of time frame. And we came across this technology used by the US military for repair, but very manual a process. So we thought, could we take this manual spray process and add the sophistication and software to be able to then use that to build parts? And that's really where the company was born. And it had what we were looking for, in that it was a very low cost and fast process. And in manufacturing, speed is money. So when you've got a process which is fast, it can be very low cost. And thus it ticked all our boxes in terms of the manufacturing technology fast, low cost, which then can be taken into production. So that was the initial hypothesis many years ago now.
And I think, given the geopolitical state of the world at the moment, your technology is critical. I wanted to know, your story kind of prompts the second question. Could you tell me a bit more about the USP of SPEE3D's technology and why it is so crucial for the manufacturing industry at the moment?
So hopefully the USP you can get from the name directly. So we are about speed, and thus, the name's an obvious one for us. So just give you some rough numbers here. We're typically somewhere between 100 to 1,000 times faster than other metal 3D printing technologies. And when you get up to those sorts of speeds, then you're looking at technology, a technology that compete with traditional casting. So casting's a technology that's been around for 5,000 years now. It really hasn't changed. We melt metal and we put it into some sort of mold, and now comes the part. So really what we're saying now is you can eliminate that mold. You don't need that mold. And suddenly you don't need a big factory, and you don't need a lot of capital intensive equipment to be able to manufacture parts anymore. So if you want to build one, you can build one. If you want to build 10, you can build 10. If you want to build 10,000, you can still build 10,000. But it's suddenly opening up that flexibility. And it's that flexibility that manufacturers are saying, well, maybe I don't want to buy 10,000 from a far off location, which takes me 6 months to get. Maybe I could build 10 here, or 100 here, or 1,000 here, but do it when I need it. So it's really moving that manufacturing power back to those people who want the actual parts.
Could you, obviously certain contracts are name sensitive, so please don't feel obligated at all to share contract names. But for those who are listening in and who want to sort of visualize what the technology looks like and what it can do practically, could you share some of, I suppose, the contracts or the projects you're most proud of that the tech has been critical in?
Yeah. So let me take you through a little bit of the journey. So as I mentioned, our background was manufacturing, and we then, through that journey, we did our initial sales into various sectors. Then about 2019, we got introduced to the defence sector. So we had no defence background whatsoever, and this was just prior to COVID, and the Australian Army came to us at that time and said, could they deploy this in the field? So what that means is, could they take the technology? And this is not a small printer. This is a 4-ton printer, the size of a small car. Could they deploy that in the field? Could they take that somewhere and with them and actually manufacture parts at the point of need? And at that time, as I said, we weren't defence people, but we knew the technology was highly deployable. It was built to be robust and could be deployed. So we said, sure, let's do that. During COVID, we went through that process then of testing with the Australian Army, and they proved that the technology is suitable to be deployed. And we then came back, did some more refinements to the technology to make it more suitable for a military environment. And we're now working with 5 defence forces across the globe, 10 systems going into Ukraine, for instance. We have 7 of them there now, supporting those efforts that are happening in Ukraine. So it's a fantastic achievement in a very short period of time of getting introduced to defence and now being deployed, as I said, with 5 defence forces globally.
My research also noted that SPEE3D was the first to manufacture metal parts on a US naval ship. Was that a sort of similar project?
Yeah, indeed. So once the technology is proven to be deployed in a army environment, so on a land environment, the next question is, can you then deploy that on a ship? And the certain configuration of this technology is a relatively straightforward one to deploy that on a ship. So we've completed that testing, and we've just completed some additional testing in the last few months, and that's testing at very cold temperatures. So in the past, we've done a lot of hot testing, relatively easy in Australia to do the hot testing. We've done deserts, we've done humidity, we've done rain. Cold, a bit more challenging down here, but we've just completed a series of testing with one of the Defence Forces to test at sub-freezing conditions.
And I mean, I think this conversation is really interesting, and I'd like to know a little bit more about you. So obviously you have a background in engineering, but as far as being able to find this niche solution, have you always had that nature to sort of interrogate the industry and find sort of gaps that can so easily be solved, and yet there seems to be others missing this?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, this is our second startup company, myself and Steve together, and the first one was an electric motor. It's got nothing to do with 3D printing, but it was the same at that time. So we developed a technology while at the university, a specialized, high efficiency, small, lightweight electric motor, and that was used in solar cars. So we thought, when it was in a solar car, what other industries could that actually go into? We then took it further into electric bikes and ceiling fans and air conditioners and pool pumps. So it's really then looking at a technology and saying, where does it suit, and really, where does it offer the most advantage for that end customer? Why should they change from what they do? Because change is hard. Everyone knows that is a very difficult thing to do. So you need to be able to offer a substantial improvement for someone to say, I'll try that, or I want to do that. And for us, it was then identifying, those markets where people would say, yeah, I've got to do that because it gives me that step change and improvement that I'm looking for. So that, and that's just our nature, inquisitive nature, myself and Steve. As I said, we're after a low cost, fast, new manufacturing technology, and really, when we started the company, it was about, we didn't have a clue about where that would come from, and it's then just doing some research. It's not that easy. It takes a bit of time and effort, but really, that's really what we focused on early on.
And I think with that, I mean, this sort of technology opens up a huge amount of opportunity, and there's so much potential for it. Are you both sort of leaning on other inspirations as far as trends and innovations go within the industry that get you excited about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, that one. So the industry that we're in, this metal 3D printing space, was really focused on, as I said, sort of slow, very precise or very complex parts. And that wasn't what we were after. So we were going after these commodity, low-cost, fast parts. So we were really targeting a different part of the market, where the industry was focusing on making things, let's say, making things as good as they could, making them absolutely perfect. We were going, right, let's push the cost down, let's push the speed up. So the general trends in the industry were with those that we weren't targeting. So it was really taking the industry into a different area and to say, let's target this different part of the market. Let's go up to this extra, this market, which no one was really targeting. So for us, that led us to develop a lot of new technologies, a lot of new ways to do things. The sector is certainly still very interesting for us, but it really, in many ways, runs a parallel path to what we're doing.
Brilliant. And I think, you mentioned that this is the second startup that you and Steve have worked together on. Stepping aside from the technical side of the company, I want to know a little bit more about the people side and the sort of leadership legacy that you two instill within your company. What does that look like?
So there's a book and an author that we both like and we both follow, Jim Collins, who is probably read by many of your listeners, and he's wrote a book called Good to Great, and the philosophies that he talks about in his book is pretty much the ones that we follow. So for those who haven't read that, I do encourage that. It is a very good read, and it talks about how companies and it's very mathematically driven. So for engineers, they love that math and that background in math. So they've done studies over 20 or 30 years. What makes a company succeed, and really the findings that he has come up with. Once we read that book, we're like, well, that's really what we inspire to be and inspire to do. So there's numerous things in there, but in terms of who we follow, what we're interested in, I would say that that's an author that and that leadership style that he promotes is really what we target.
I want to take that one step further. At the moment, a lot of businesses are really struggling within the manufacturing industry for recruitment. And, the argument goes that theory is one thing, but actually hard labor is another thing. And trying to make manufacturing, I suppose, look sexy is really tough. So how are you and Steve tackling that?
We're a bit lucky in that respect. 3D printing is an interesting space, and it's a new technology that a lot of people want to get involved in. On top of that, we use high-speed robotics. We use rocket nozzles within our printers, very sophisticated software algorithms. So we're tackling some of the most challenging problems that people are targeting today. So you put all that together, it attracts the best people, and really, that's one of our assets is our people, and being able to find the right people. We're a global company now. We have people all across the world, and we're constantly looking for the right people, the best people, and as I said, we're a bit lucky in that we can attract them. People see it and go, yeah, I want to get involved. I love those industries, be it defense or be it space or be it manufacturing, but moving manufacturing into the new arenas, bringing manufacturing back to where it all began, and not having to rely on others. So controlling your own destiny. That's the sort of technology that we offer, and in one way we're lucky that we can then attract the best people, because you can then build the best products.
I love that. I absolutely love that. But taking that into consideration, I think from what I'm gathering, the process of developing this tech, it's not just a sort of one try and you've nailed it from the beginning. I'm sure that you guys do go through moments where it is demotivating. You hit a brick wall and it's like, how are we overcoming this? So in those moments when it looks like a challenge to reach the end goal, how do you and Steve keep your team motivated?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and the question's a fantastic one, because we're actually having a catch up of the whole team in roughly 2 weeks. So I was just starting to work on a presentation on the history. Someone's asked, how did you actually start, and can you explain that to the team? So I was going back through our archives and looking at some of the successes and failures that we had, and that's fascinating in itself. There's things that 5 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever it was, that I'd completely forgotten about. I'm like, oh, that one didn't work, didn't it? So really it is about, in one way, trialing things, and if they don't work, it's then going back to first principles and working on why they don't work, because really you should have a normal engineering says, have a hypothesis, test the hypothesis, and iterate around the hypothesis. But if it doesn't work, it's why not? You should be able to go back to those first principles and say, this does work, or it should work. Sometimes they don't. We've got plenty of ideas and concepts which just didn't go anywhere, or had to get shelved. How do you keep the team motivated? It's really about encourage them to continue down those paths, but eventually, you got to pull a pin on some ideas and say, right, it didn't work. We'll have to go with Plan B, whatever it may be, and really just trying to assist and bring in those best people. If the best people you have can't solve the problem, maybe it's an unsolvable problem, and you've got to look for another path.
And I think that's really important from a leadership perspective, because I think you can be a leader who is very determined and very adamant that once they've got their mind set on a particular pathway, it's that way or it's nothing. And I think from what it sounds like, you and Steve have adopted that sort of humility to reach a point where you'd rather not take the team down a dying route and just say, look, guys, this isn't going to work, so we're going to have to regroup and start again. And I think that also is a great way to build trust within your team.
Yeah, 100%. And we've all done it. We've all gone down that path, and sometimes you do take things a bit too far, where you should have cut your losses earlier. But certainly, we're like anyone. We have those challenges. We go through. We challenge people to say, is this the right way? And sometimes you don't need to innovate. Sometimes what you have is good enough, and you've got to say, no, stop there. We've got to keep going in one way or another. We need to commercialize the product. The R&D's done. It's not perfect. It's an 80% product, but we've got to get that feedback from the market before taking those next steps.
Yeah, I love that. I'd like to zoom out a little bit from the company and into the broader manufacturing industry. Could you tell me a little bit more about sort of what your reflections are on the industry, considering that, we've had the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, all these little, I say little in, a very ironic sense of the word, but they add up. What are your thoughts on the state of manufacturing at the moment? And what do you think could be done better?
Yeah, so the many parts of that. So let me start at 3D printing. So 3D printing was hyped up over the last 10 years of being the savior of many, many things. It's not. 3D printing is a tool. Like any other tool, it has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. And for the sector and for the manufacturing sector, you've got to just evaluate it and say, is it for me or is it not? It won't be for everyone. And even within 3D printing, even within metal 3D printing, there'll be a dozen or two dozen different technologies out there. Each of them has their sweet spot, and each of them works in a particular area well and in a particular area poorly. So in a manufacturing sense, it's really valuing those technologies and getting to a conclusion pretty quickly. Yes, technology A works or it doesn't, and do I take technology B? So, but the industry's moving, the manufacturing sector is moving, and it's moving in a fantastic way. New technologies are coming in. It's really driven in one way by digital technologies is driving. Casting, as we said, hasn't changed for 5,000 years. It is now. But it's looking at those new technologies and working out which one's right for me and which one's not. So you've got to discount them, and you've got to, as quick as you can, either say yes or no, and then move on if you need to. So I think that's very, very important in manufacturing today. But then, as I said, look at these new technologies that are coming out, evaluate them, and if they're useful, give them a shot, because if you don't, your competitor will.
Yeah, I love that. So taking that into consideration, for others in the 3D printing sector, what could those businesses be learning from SPEE3D?
Yeah, it's really focusing on your competitive advantages, where you sit in the market. You can't do everything. It doesn't matter what technology is. It doesn't suit every application. So you've really got to narrow down and say, where is my technology very, very suited? Why would those customers use my technology? It's an early technology. Every type of 3D printing is new, and they're looking for those spaces. So identify. Don't get caught up in the hype. 3D printing is not the savior for everyone, and people don't want to hear those stories again. So really, I would say identify the technology, identify the markets, go after those strongly. There's plenty of markets out there. There's plenty of opportunities out there. If people come to us and say, I want the next crown for my tooth or something like that. So 3D printing is used to print crowns for your teeth. That's not us at all. But likewise, if someone says, I need a part for my military vehicle, very suited to us. So it's really about not trying to do everything, specialize in where you think your technology is suited, and then find those customers that are willing to prove it with you.
Brilliant. So with that in mind, what does 2024 hold for the business? And then on a more longer term scale, what is your vision for the company's growth in the next coming years?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating journey for us. As I said, our journey with defence only started a few years ago, and that's skyrocketed. We're probably 80% defence nowadays, and our ideal mix is actually 50-50 defence and industry, and particularly heavy industry is really what we're targeting. So for us, 2024 is about getting into some of these heavy industry sectors. So what I mean by heavy industry, it's mining, oil and gas, rail, marine, automotive, those industries where they're having problems today, especially supply chain problems. If you're on a mine site and you can't get your part, that might be costing you $1 million a day. And being able to build a part right there and then is something that is very, very attractive to those heavy industries. So it's not the cost of the part. That might be a $50 part. But if you don't have that part, you're forking out $1 million, and it might take you 2 weeks to get that part over. So those sorts of industries are the ones we're targeting next. That's essentially why defence like this technology. They can get their parts when and where they need them. So for us, near term, really getting into this heavy industry sector. We know the needs there, and it's just about finding the right partners and working with them.
Oh, that's awesome. That is absolutely awesome, Byron. We're coming up to my final question, and I absolutely love asking this question. What is the most rewarding aspect of your role?
Yeah, for us, it's about helping our end customers. It's fascinating being in 3D printing. I'll go on a work trip to, let's say, Europe. One day we'll be in speaking to a door handle manufacturer. The next, someone who's making electric vehicles. The day after, someone who's making military parts, and then into something else. So we see this diverse cross-section of industry that many people wouldn't see, and it's really then seeing, can we help those people and really seeing them succeed. So it's that real success of our customers, which is really satisfying for us, because they're doing something that no one else has done before, and doing it in a way that no one's done it. So getting that success, be it in a military sense or industrial sense, is really what drives us.
Brilliant. Oh, Byron, I've absolutely loved this conversation. Thank you.
No problem.
What I really enjoyed about the conversation with Byron is his passion for how many opportunities 3D printing is opening up for the company. In addition to that, it seems like the complexity of the work they do only pushes the SPEE3D team further. I also really admired his approach to leadership and how he talked about the team is not afraid to take risks, but even more importantly, they feel safe enough to retract and start again when they can sense that they're reaching a dead end. I think that that's a really critical quality to have. But like I mentioned at the beginning, we have covered the topic of 3D printing before. So if you want to learn more about the innovation happening in that sector, you can find links to those episodes in our show notes. And if you want to read more about SPEE3D and the capabilities of the company, check out the latest issue of Manufacturing Today, where their story can be found in those pages. From me, it's been an absolute pleasure to be speaking with Byron, and a special thanks is owed to the team over at SPEE3D for making this conversation possible. Join us next time, where we'll be sharing more conversations with leaders from around the globe. See you then. This podcast episode is brought to you by Fine Lined Media. Inspiring Industry is written and hosted by Danielle Champ. Our sound engineer and videographer is Gavin Mitchell. Lee Prothero is our creative lead, and he's joined by Jamie Alvin, our graphics designer. Rosie Clegg and Sarah Rudge are our digital marketing executives. And we'd like to extend a special thanks to our assistant editor, Mary Float, and our editor, Libby Hammond. The views, information, and opinions expressed during this episode are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Fine Lined Media and its team.